and going down, we don't even feel any sliding at all. So the transition is almost perfect. Alright, so this is a game I've been working on recently, and it's a top-down 2D game, and the movement is already implemented. The camera follows the player, and I even have a floating joystick implemented for mobile controls. Everything is working except that the player is a little red dot and not an actual. So today we're going to replace that with an actual character. The idea for the game is that it's a music sorcerer, a mage that runs around and attacks using rhythm, magical notes, and sound waves. And by the end of this video, I want to have a character that is fully animated and running inside of the project. So now we're over in the Sorcerer's Games image generator, and I'll paste a prompt that I prepared for the character that we want to make. And to go over it quickly, it's a top-down 2D pixel art character for a fantasy action RPG, and it has a bunch of characteristics such as being heroic and having like a messy sand blonde hair and bright blue eyes. The style is gonna be like a polished pixel art designed specifically for a top-down game and using a similar quality to modern indie pixel art RPGs. And more importantly, we're going to generate like our character with a solid green background for chroma keying. So now we're gonna copy it and paste it over to the prompt text input over here. And I'm using these models over here. There's other models that we can use, but we can even use the local GPU, but I'm currently using these because I've tested them and I managed to have like the best results in pixel art with these models. But that doesn't mean that other ones can't do the same job with different characteristics. So we're going to set the aspect ratio to 1:1, the quantity to 1 to generate 4 by 1 for each model, and we're going to press generate and wait until it gives us the results. Alright, so our generations that had finished, and as you can see, each one has its own interpretation of the prompt that's given, and a lot of them have very distinct styles. For example, one that CD-ROM5 gave us is quite dialed down, and honestly it looks more like a 16-bit pixel art. Meanwhile, I do really like the what CD-ROM 4.5 gave us, because it looks sort of, yeah, it's the most solid out of the bunch. Now we're going to send it over to the background removal. So we're going to be sending it over to the background removal. And now that it's here, we're going to press remove background. And since we had our character since we had our generation with a green background, as you can see, we have a very clean background removal. And then we're going to go to the video generator. I'm gonna attach our character that we generated with the image generator, and here is where we're gonna generate the animations. For this part, I like to use 1-2 points. You're free to use any other ones, but don't mind that each one of them costs some credit unless you use your local GPU. So yeah, we're gonna have to be wise with choosing the best model for your generation. And for our character, I want to generate an idle animation, and I want to have it be a seamless loop so that we can use it and have it look as natural as possible inside of the game. I'm gonna press generate. So we got our generation for the idle animation, and it's a simple like an up animation with a little flick of the wand over here. It's not really noticeable, but yeah. It looks like a solid idle animation. We could do a little better for it, but we're gonna use this for now, as we're just trying to prototype our character inside of Unity. And what's really important is that it's gonna be a seamless loop for it to work. Now I'm gonna fast forward and generate the walking animations for up, down, and right. Now we're gonna use the right one for the left, only reversed. So we're going to be making 3 different animations in the next step. Alright, so we finished generating our animations, and we're just going to go through them quickly to see what we got. So this one is the first animation we generated, which was the idle animation. This one is the player moving right, so he's slightly turning then going right. This one is the player going up, so he's turning and then going up and facing us with his back. And we're going to center him in the frame later on. We don't want him to be moving in the same frame outside of the center. This one is the player moving down, and it looks pretty decent. And the last one is the player moving left. So he's gonna go from the idle animation to the left state. And we're going to configure it so that there is a transition from the idle to the other animations, and then we're gonna be looping the rest of the animation without the turning. Alright, so now that we have our animations, we're going to be queuing them up for the auto sprite tool so that we generate our sprites. So here in the auto sprite tool, this tool in a nutshell turns our animations into a bunch of sprites so that it doesn't look so robotic when it's generated by a video generator. And the way it does that is by taking a bunch of frames from the video and putting them in a sprite sheet, and also giving us a bunch of tools to configure our sprite sheet. And then we're gonna process all 5 videos. So I finished processing our videos, and it generated our sprite sheets for each animations, and it gives us this window over here that we can use to edit the sprite sheets. And we have a lot of options. For example, we can change the aspect ratio of the sprite sheet, and we're gonna have it be fit for now. We can change how many frames per second over here. For example, we can preview it, so if it's 1 by second, it's not gonna be nice, but for example, if it's 15 per second, yeah, it's still gonna be slow. So our standard is going to be 30 frames per second. Now that we finished processing our sprite sheets, now that we finished generating our sprite sheets, we're gonna just process sprites for each one of them. So we're gonna process sprites for this one over here, and so each time it finishes processing, we get the option of whether we want to download it as a sprite sheet or as a PNG zip, which contains a whole bunch of frames, or the entirety of our frames in one compressed zip file. Alright, so we just finished generating our sprite sheets for each animation, and we have 5 animations over here: idle, moving front, moving to the left, to the right, and moving up. So if we open the sprite editor for each one, as you can see, we have our perfectly high quality sprite sheets with the different frames. And then now we're gonna in Unity slice them up and use each frame as a frame for our animation. So I'm going to do that right now. We can use automatic slice and press slice, but that's going to give us an inconsistent, slicing. In this case, it was pretty accurate, but it's not always consistent. But we're going to use the automatic for our idle animation now and apply. And now when we close, we're going to see our frames in here. Now we're going to do the same for each of the other animations. And when we finish, we're going to add them to the animations for our character animator. So we just finished cutting up our frames, and then we went ahead and added them to our player visuals. So we no longer have the red dots as a placeholder, and furthermore, we added an animator to the player's visuals at least, and we made sure to add a bunch of animation states, being the idle, walk, sprint, and dash. And of course, these are just placeholders because we only have the walk in different directions. And here we have the animator of the player, and as you can see, we have a bunch of states being this transition from so the first one being idle. Of course, this is the default state of the player, and afterwards we got the transition from idle to moving up, down, right, or left, and then we can go to the loop of going up, down, right, and left. Now if we try it, we're gonna press play and see how it plays out, going from a single prompt to a 2D playable character. And as we can see, this is going up, and the transition from going to idle to up is a little slow, but we can definitely adjust it. Now if you go right, it's a little clipping on the right animation, but it's definitely a really good result, I would say. As you can see, the player is sliding a little, but we can definitely change that later on. And going down, we don't even feel any sliding at all. So the transition is almost perfect. Now I would say that the animation of going down is probably the best one, but all of them are looking pretty nice. So this is a workflow I've been enjoying because it gets me from an idea to something playable really quickly. And if I ever want to redesign the character later, I can just update the prompt and repeat the process. If you enjoyed the video, let me know what you'd like to see next. In the future videos, we'll keep building this game by adding combat, improving the animation by adding an animation to the top right, left, or bottom, right, and bottom, left. And we'll add enemies, combat, spell effects, and everything else needed to turn this prototype into a complete game.